Well, now that finally Philippines seem to be opening up, the only thing that's closed right now are unvaccinated foreigners, with some exceptions, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what is the best visa for you to get nowadays, although sometimes you have more than just one option. Okay? Hang loose, stay with me. The most popular entry document that you can get is the so-called balikbayan. So let's talk about what is balikbayan. A balikbayan who may be either one of the following: a Filipino citizen who has been continuously out of the Philippines for a period of at least 1 year. Or maybe if you have a visa and you are staying, or let's say you're an immigrant or a student in a foreign country, that 1 year probably is not going to be enforced. Now, Filipino overseas worker, a former Filipino citizen, and his family who had been naturalized in a foreign country and comes or returns to the Philippines. What does this mean? You're a former Filipino, you got naturalized in the US or another foreign country, and you want to go back, that's a former Filipino, you can come home as a balikbayan. By the way, balikbayan, the literal meaning of balikbayan is return home. Return home to your, or return to your home country. That's what balikbayan means. You're a Filipino overseas worker. If you are one, you know you are one. If you're a Filipino citizen who has never been naturalized in the US or another foreign country, that means you continue to be a Filipino citizen. You could also come home. You're also a balikbayan. Now, here's the other thing. Immediate family members, spouse and children of a balikbayan who are nationals of countries falling under Executive under 408. I'll show that to you. Next slide. Traveling together with the balikbayan. Traveling together with the balikbayan. So please do not ask me, oh gee, my wife is in the Philippines, can I go get a balikbayan? You cannot. You have to be traveling with your balikbayan or Philippine citizen or former citizen spouse. Children also, foreign children. So if you're a foreigner, you're classified as a balikbayan if you're married to a Filipino or former Filipino citizen. For example, if spouse is a citizen of Pakistan or China, they will not be classified as balikbayan because they are not listed in the 408 country. They must secure entry visa prior to entry to the Philippines. A foreign national spouse and or child of a balikbayan may only be given the said privilege if he or she is traveling with his/her balikbayan spouse or parent. Okay? So that's very clear. And by the way, balikbayans can stay up to 1 year and still subject to extension. Now, let's look at the Executive 408 countries. Who are in the Executive 408 countries? Here's the list of countries whose nationals can enter the Philippines without visa. It says that is also the same list of countries that are balikbayan countries. Please pause the video and take a look and see if your country is listed here. You can see US is included, Canada is included, Brazil is included. There are 157 countries here. Now, if you are a national, for example, as I mentioned earlier, if you're a national of Pakistan, you're Pakistani, even though you're married to a Filipino citizen, your wife, who's a Filipino citizen, let's say, will be allowed to go home as a balikbayan, but you are not considered a balikbayan. And by the way, these 408 countries, we'll talk about these two. These are the people who can go to the Philippines without any visa, and they'll be allowed up to 30 days. Again, subject to extension. Now, it's important to note that if you are married to a Filipino citizen and you go to the Philippines with your spouse, you're a balikbayan and you can stay up to 1 year. Also, your Filipino citizen spouse may be unvaccinated, although she will be subjected to quarantine. But the spouse, the foreign spouse, will need to be vaccinated to be able to enter the Philippines. The quarantine is only allowed for Filipino citizens and former Filipino citizens. And by the way, dual citizens are also Filipino citizens, okay? That's why it's called dual. You're a citizen of the US or another foreign country, and you're a citizen of the Philippines. So dual citizens are the same as Filipino citizens. So Filipino citizens and former Filipino citizens will be allowed into the country even though they're unvaccinated, but they will be subject to quarantine. A foreign national are not going to be allowed in unless they're fully vaccinated. Now, what is the second type of visa that is very popular? These are the so-called tourist visa, better yet, visa-free, no visa required, tourist. Now, this is the list of visa-free countries. By the way, I'll show that to you. Nationals from countries listed below, that's the same chart I showed earlier, but I'll show it again, who are traveling to the Philippines for business and tourism purposes are allowed to enter the Philippines without visa for a stay not exceeding 30 days. You're only allowed 30 days. Provided they hold valid tickets for their return journey to port of origin or next port of destination and their passports, valid for a period of at least 6 months beyond the contemplated period of stay. By the way, the other thing that is required is the so-called travel medical insurance for balikbayan, including the foreign spouse of the balikbayan are not required to have travel insurance, okay? But for people who are coming in as visa-free tourists, meaning they're not married to a Filipino citizen or former Filipino citizen, they will be required not only medical insurance, but they're also going to be required a return ticket. You will need to have a return ticket valid for 30 days. Now, although the tourist visa could be extended, and that means you will have to rebook your ticket, initially when you enter, you have to have a return ticket. It's unfortunate, but that is the requirement. And of course, the common requirement that their passport should be valid for at least 6 months beyond the contemplated period of stay. These are the countries that we are talking about. If you belong to if your passport is to any of these countries, you have the 30-day visa-free privilege. Pause the video and take a look and see if your country is listed here. But if your foreign passport is not from any of these countries, in my example, China or Pakistan is not listed here, you are not qualified for visa-free. You will need to get a visa. You need to apply for a tourist visa. This one, you don't need a tourist visa. You just go in and you're good to go as long as you meet all the other requirements. Now, an exemption to this 30-day limit is the Brazilian and Israeli nationals are given 59 days based on existing agreements. And the following are allowed to enter the Philippines without visa for a stay not exceeding 14 days. 14 days. Holders of Hong Kong Special Administrative Passport, holders of Macau Special Administrative Region or SAR passports. The following are allowed to enter the Philippines without visa for a stay not exceeding 7 days. This one is only 7 days. Holders of Macau Portuguese passport, holders of Hong Kong British passport. I don't think any of my viewers fall in this category. But anyway, I'm just giving it to you for completeness. Now, what do you need to do to get a visa? For all these visitors' visa, you are allowed a maximum of 59 days, call it 60 days. Meaning if you have multiple entry, you will need to exit and re-enter Philippines after 59 days in the country. However, extension may be obtained. And that's why they call it LSVVE visa. That's called Long Stay Visitor Visa Extension. Foreign nationals can enjoy longer visa extensions, 6 months under single transaction. The visa cost is 13,900 pesos for visa-required nationals and 11,500 for non-visa required nationals. That means if you came in as visa-free and then you need an extension, that's how much you have to pay. Foreign travelers can prolong their stay in the Philippines without the need to frequently visit Bureau of Immigration for processing of documents. The maximum stay given to nationals under Executive Order 408 is 36 months, 3 years, okay? You can keep on extend up to 3 years. While visa-required nationals, China and Pakistan as an example, are given 24 months. A new visa sticker will replace the wet stamp used by BI in implementing extensions of stay in the passport of foreign nationals. So when you have a passport, they stamp it and they will replace the sticker once you extend it. What is a better alternative than keeping on extending a tourist visa? Well, you may want, if you are a Filipino or a former Filipino, I should say, if you are a former Filipino citizen, you may want to apply for dual citizenship. Let's talk about who qualifies for dual citizenship. Republic Act 9225 only applies to natural-born Filipino who lost their Philippine citizenship through naturalization in another country. Some Americans or foreigners or Caucasians were asking me the question, how can I get dual citizenship? You cannot. You have to be a former Filipino citizen to be able to apply for one. Foreigners who wish to acquire Philippine citizenship through naturalization could apply under a different law but not under RA 9225. This is not part of this presentation, okay? So if you want to be an immigrant, you have to apply just like in the US, you have to apply to become a Philippine citizen. But you cannot become dual just by virtue of applying for dual citizenship. You can't. This is only granted to former Filipino citizens. RA 9225 does not apply to those born in the US. What does that mean? Your parents are Filipino. You were born in the US, so you became a US national by virtue of your birth because that is US law. Guess what? You are considered Filipino, provided at the time of your birth, your parents, your mother or father, Filipino. Then you are considered Filipino, so you do not have to apply for dual citizenship. But you have the same effect of a dual citizen. Why is that? Because when you file a report of birth, remember, Philippines does not have a record of your birth because most likely, very likely, your parents registered you in the US, you were born in the US, you have your birth certificate in the US, and they forgot about the Philippines. So Philippines has no record of your birth. So all you have to do is to file a report of birth and you will be able to get your passport because you are considered a Filipino. Born before January 17, 1973 to a Filipino father, okay, so as I mentioned earlier, your father has to be Filipino, not the mother. If you are born prior to 73, if you are born after 1973 or January 17, 1973, either your father or mother has to be a Filipino and you qualify as being a Filipino as well. Under either of the two circumstances above, the person is a dual citizen by birth. Okay, so you're not a dual citizen under 9225. You are a citizen at birth because you are born of Filipino parents. And all they have to do is to comply with the report of birth requirement. Now, to apply for dual citizenship, what are the documents required? Complete the application form, a petition for reacquisition of Philippine citizenship. That form is given to you at the Philippine consulate. You just fill it out. You'll be given the oath of allegiance. That's also prepared by the Philippine consulate. 3 colored photo with white background. Please update, check the internet, make sure that it's still 3 copies, okay? Now, in my case, what I did is I made copies. If they say 3, I bring 4 or 5, okay? Birth certificate, NSO, National Statistics Office, or now called PSA, Philippine Statistics Authority, if you were born in the Philippines. Foreign birth certificate if born outside of the Philippines. Photocopy of foreign passport, so your U.S. passport. By the way, some people always inquire, gee, I have the birth certificate issued by NSO. NSO does not exist now. It's called PSA. That is still good. They simply changed the name from NSO to PSA, but it's the same thing. So that is good if you got an NSO issued birth certificate. Certificate of naturalization and other document. Now, in the U.S., certificate of naturalization shows your formal nationality. So it will show you are a Filipino citizen. And you need to bring that as proof. Okay? That's why for some people who want to come in, for people who got naturalized in the U.S. who want to come in as isbalikbayan, you can either show your birth certificate, NSO or PSA issued, or expired passport, old expired passport, just to show you are a former citizen. If you don't have either of those, your U.S. naturalization citizenship is good. Same here, when you apply for dual, they wanted to see that. Now, if you're in another foreign country, I don't know if the certificate of naturalization they have shows your nationality. You have to check that out. 2 pieces of self-addressed stamp envelope, and a fee. That's the most important thing, a fee of $50. Now, this could change too depending on the location, depending on the time. So, double check that, okay? Now, here's the application process. Steps to take based on experience in New York City, and this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. This is pre-pandemic. Make sure all required documents are in your possession. Go to the Philippine consulate or embassy as early as possible that has jurisdiction in your place of birth in the U.S. Present the petition for dual citizenship and issuance of identification certificate along with other required documents and a fee of $50. Now, make sure you save this because this is what you present if you do not have a passport to enter the Philippines as a dual citizen. They will ask for your dual citizenship ID. So when they issue this to you, make sure you save it. Better yet, I always recommend to everyone, just get a Philippine passport. You're a Filipino citizen, so get yourself a Philippine passport. It doesn't cost more than $100 and it's good for 10 years. The original birth certificate issued to your parents when you were born is no longer acceptable. They usually require to be NSO or PSA certified. If you don't have this, it will cause some delays unless you argue and win that the original birth certificate should be accepted. I did in New York. I had to argue hard, and I was able to get my dual, and I was able to get my Philippine passport by talking directly to the Philippine consul. I went and bypassed the clerical staff. Bring all documents with you, including expired passport, current passport, extra pictures, birth certificate from the Philippines or U.S., or other proof of birth, U.S. naturalization certificate, self-addressed envelope, and stamps. If in doubt, just bring it with you. Also, photocopy of the documents, because photocopying of documents at the consulate will cause delay and cost you money. The charge is too much. It's like $1 a page. So if you have so many pages, because they ask 3 or 4 pages of documents, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So make sure you make those copies before you go. Go to Staples, photocopy them, pack everything, then go. Now, this is pre-pandemic time. During the pandemic, they asked for you to send the paperwork by email or mail, and I wouldn't send the originals. Just send the copies with a notation. I will present the original when I'm called in for the oath taking. That's how you do it. Now, I understand since I think, is it April 1? Fairly recently, the consulate offices are in full mode again. Okay, so I don't know if they still require appointment, and requiring an appointment is not bad. It's not a bad idea, because sometimes there's a long line at the Philippine consulate. With the appointment, you're able to process. They're able to process you more quickly and more efficiently. That's not bad, as long as there is a spot. Okay, now some people may say, "Oh, I don't want to be setting up appointments. I'd like to go in." Well, it just depends on how they're doing it now. You will be interviewed, and if everything goes well, you'll be asked to come back in the afternoon for oath taking, and you will walk away with dual citizenship papers. Again, that is pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I had all the papers in, filed the application, and after the staff reviews it, they say, "Okay, come back at 4 o'clock. So we went ahead, had lunch, and walked around New York, and then came back at 4 o'clock. We had an oath taking, and we were given our dual citizenship papers. No hassle whatsoever. I'm 2 hours away from New York, so it would have been a hassle if I had to come back, and no, I had no difficulty. Hopefully, it's back to normal again, to the same way. The next two things we are going to talk about is SRRV, that is Special Resident Visa, and 13A visa, that's for those people who are married to Filipino citizens. Now, does it mean that these are only the visas being issued by the Philippines? No. They have a lot of other visas, but these are the most popular ones. So for people who really have the intention of staying in the Philippines, as I mentioned earlier, rather than applying constantly for a tourist visa extension and tourist visa extension, and then at the end of the third year or maybe 2 years, you're going to be required to leave the country and then come back. It's too much hassle. Get yourself a more or less a permanent visa. So the first one we'll talk about is SRRV visa, and what are the requirements. This is not an all-inclusive list, okay, of requirements. The Special Resident Retiree Visa, as it's called, is issued to foreigners and overseas Filipinos. So if you were formerly a Filipino citizen, you are now a U.S. citizen or another country, you lost your Philippine citizenship, and that's why you need to have a visa, unless you go back as a balikbayan, you need either an SRRV visa or a dual citizenship. So this is issued to foreigners and also former Filipinos who became U.S. citizen or foreign country. It entitles the holder to multiple entry privilege with the right to stay permanently, indefinitely in the Philippines. Isn't that nice? For some people who don't like to become dual citizen, and there's very few instances when it's not beneficial to be a dual citizen. A retiree who applies for non-immigrant visa, special resident retiree visa, has the option to enroll based on his retirement status. If you have a pension, now there are certain requirements, unlike dual citizenship, there are certain requirements. If you have pension 50 years old and above, you have to be a little bit older. The required time deposit is $10,000 plus monthly pension of $800 for a single applicant and $1,000 a month for couple. And you need to invest $10,000. Now, if you have no pension, must be between 35 to 49 years old, a 50,000 time deposit is required. 50,000 time deposit. That's a lot of money. If 50 years old and above, 20,000 time deposit is required. Again, if you have no pension. In the first instance, you're 50 years old, but you're receiving pension of at least $800, and if you're married, $1,000. They only require $10,000 deposit or investment. If you have no pension and you're 50 years old and above, you're required to have 20,000 time deposit. If former Filipino citizen at least 35 years old, by the way, you may want to double check on this 35 years old, because I heard before that they were planning to increase that age requirement. So this may have changed, okay? Just inquire what is the age required. A former Filipino citizen at least 35 years old, regardless of the number of dependents, a $1,500 500 time deposit is required. So again, you get the benefit for being a former Filipino citizen. The time deposit required is only 1,005. But if you're a foreigner, the others apply. Ambassadors of foreign countries who serve and retire in the Philippines, current and former staff members of international organizations at least 50 years old, $1,500 time deposit is required. Resident retiree can bring with him without additional deposit his spouse, his unmarried child below 21 years old, or if the spouse is not joining, 2 unmarried children under 21 years old. Additional children with the same qualification may also join, but there is an additional deposit of $15,000 per child. This does not apply to former Filipino citizens. So, as you can see, when you apply for SRRV, there are some strings attached to it. So you're required to have some investments. Other provisions of SRRV visa are the holder of SRRV may reside in the Philippines without securing extension of his stay from the Bureau of Immigration. PRA, Philippine Retirement Authority, members who are holders of SRRV are exempted from paying travel tax. They have not stayed in the Philippines for more than 1 year from the date of last entry. So if you stay in the Philippines beyond 1 year, you will be subject to travel tax, okay? You're only exempt if you did not stay more than 1 year from the date of last entry. SRRV holder may not own real property in the Philippines. Unlike dual citizen, you can. If legally married to Philippine citizen, he or she may construct a residential unit on a parcel of land owned and or registered in the name of the Philippine spouse. Natural-born Filipinos whose SRRV has been issued may own, acquire a maximum of 5,000 square meters or urban land and 3 hectares of agricultural land. So this is the same as if you are a former Filipino, you don't have to have SRRV. Let's say you don't have a visa. Right now, let's say you're a U.S. citizen, you don't have any visa. Can you own land? And this is the same limitation. So now when you have an SRRV, that limitation extends. The dollar deposit may be converted into peso after 30 days upon issuance of special resident visa. So you don't need to, but it could be. But it doesn't necessarily mean you will get the money back. I think you are supposed to leave it there for as long as you have the SRRV visa. However, I did not include that here. I believe you can, let's say, buy condominium or real estate, and that will count as an investment in the Philippines. You don't necessarily have to get a time deposit certificate. Now, what are the benefits of SRRV visa? Permanent non-immigrant status with multiple entry privileges through special resident retiree visa. Exemption from customs duties and taxes for importation of personal effects. Exemption from exit clearance and re-entry permits. Exemption from payment of travel tax provided the retiree has not stayed in the Philippines for more than 1 year from the date of last entry. Conversion of the requisite deposit into active investment, including purchase of condominium unit. That's the one I mentioned earlier. Interest on foreign currency deposit is tax-free and payable to retiree in Philippine pesos. Foreign currency time deposit can be converted into Philippine peso deposit, but interest is subject to withholding tax. Pension annuities remitted to the Philippines are tax-free. Guaranteed withdrawal of the required deposit, including reinvestment profit, capital gains, and dividends from investments. By the way, somebody asked me the question, I heard that if I have an SRRV, I'm not allowed to be out of the Philippines longer than, say, 6 months or 1 year. I never heard that, but I won't be surprised. For example, if you're a permanent resident in the U.S., you cannot leave the U.S. for longer than used to be 12 months. But now I heard, my understanding is it's 6 months without written permission. So if you're going to extend your stay outside of the United States, let's say you're a green card holder, you don't have a U.S. passport, you're not a citizen, you can only stay out of the country for 12 months before. Now I think it's 6 months without written permission. If you have written permission, you can. So I won't be surprised if Philippines will require the same thing. So just inquire about that before you stay out of the country. So now let's talk about another visa called the 13A and 13G immigrant visa. What is 13A and 13G visa? 13G is a permanent resident visa similar to green card in the US. It is for former Filipino citizens, their spouse, and minor children if you don't want to take advantage of dual citizenship. 13G visa was available at time of dual citizenship was not yet available. So even before the dual citizenship became available, there was already a 13G visa. 13A is a temporary resident visa for spouse and minor children under 21 of a Philippine citizen to legally live in the Philippines for 1 year and turns into a permanent visa after the first year. So the second year, when you renew it, it becomes permanent. 13G is for spouse and minor children of former Filipino citizen. What are the document requirements for 13A? Notarized letter of application by Filipino spouse, notarized general application form, copy of birth certificate of Filipino spouse authenticated by NSO-PSA. So that should be an NSO-PSA issued birth certificate. By the way, some people wanted to apply for 13A visa in the US. Now, during the pandemic time, they stopped processing application in the US. You have to go into the country, and I believe this is still in effect today, but I'm not sure. You have to go to the country, to the Philippines, let's say using a tourist visa or using a visa-free entry, and then you go to the immigration office with your wife, and then together you fill out an application for 13A visa. I think that is the procedure today. Can you apply again for 13A visa while in the US after this pandemic is over? I don't know. You just have to inquire about the new process. Authenticated copy of the marriage contract by NSO-PSA or Philippine Embassy abroad if you got married abroad. So you cannot just use your marriage certificate. You have to have it authenticated by the Philippine Embassy. Immigration clearance certificate. Copy of foreigner's passport showing date of arrival and visa, balikbayan stamp, for example. Certification of savings bank account with minimum $10,000 to prove that you can financially support your family. Sigurista talagang Pilipinas, ano? So that's not an investment. You just have to show proof. Pay about 20,000. This one is in pesos. In total, for fees, 10,000 for application and 10,000 for approval. Wow. Money, money, money. After the first application, your resident visa will be granted for only 1 year. After 1 year, you'll have to submit another application, but a simpler way, and the visa will then be good for 10 years before it needs to be extended again. If you are married to a Filipina, you might also think about staying in the Philippines on the basis of balikbayan visa, which requires that you get out of the Philippines once a year and then return. I believe that could be subject to extension also, the balikbayan. Documents required for 13G visa. 13G is an immigrant visa issued to natural-born citizens of the Philippines who has been naturalized in a foreign country. Documents required: notarized letter of application, general application form duly accomplished, and notarized BI form. NS authenticated copy of birth certificate of the applicant, Bureau of Immigration BI clearance certificate, plain photocopy passport with English translation if written in other foreign language by the Philippine Embassy, consulate nearest to the place where the passport was issued. If the applicant is joined by his/her spouse and unmarried children, copy of marriage contract of applicant and spouse, birth certificate of minor unmarried children, NSO-PSA certified or authenticated by Philippine Embassy, consulate nearest the place where the marriage was solemnized, or place of birth with English translation if it's applicable. Photocopy of passports of foreign national dependents showing its bio page, admission stamp, and authorization stay with at least 20 days valid stay. Now, I understand when you're applying for a visa in the Philippines, specifically 13A visa, and I'm sure 13G same thing will apply, or even SRRV will apply, that they will extend whatever visa you have, whether it's a tourist visa or a balikbayan entry or whatever, that they will provide you with the extension until your visa is processed, approved, or denied. So that's what I have right now. I would really recommend that for some married people, and I'm really surprised that, they're married to a Filipina, and instead of getting a 13A visa, unless, they don't have the necessary money to show, okay, why not get a 13A visa or SRRV visa if you have money to invest? Or if you have money to show only, then at least get a 13A visa and be able to reside with your spouse with less restriction than constantly getting and renewing tourist visa. That's the best way to do it. And unless there's a valid reason, of course, always bring your wife with you when you go to the Philippines. Let her see the United States. Let her see the foreign country. This way you will not have any problem coming back. A lot of people got caught during the pandemic. They left without their spouse, and then they stopped the SRRV, the 13A. They were all denied. In fact, at one point, even Filipino citizens were denied. But that did not last long. They quickly changed that and allowed Filipinos. But then even former Filipinos were being denied. So if you have a dual citizenship, you have no problem. You will always be allowed. Except for that one time that Filipinos outside of the Philippines were not allowed to go back in, which is really bad. But they learned quickly. And I think it's only a matter of a few days, and they changed that immediately because they got a lot of flack from everybody on that. So, guys, this is all I have to offer today. I'll appreciate it if you can share this with other people. And do put in the comment section what you think you should do. I will appreciate it if you click like this video. That will help me a lot. And do subscribe to my channel unless you have already done so. God bless, and make it a great day.